The eviction notice felt as cold and final as a tombstone. Alara traced the bold, red letters with a trembling finger, the words blurring through a film of unshed tears. Rent overdue. Vacate premises in 72 hours. 3 days. She had 3 days to find a miracle. In her small, threadbare apartment, the silence was broken only by the shallow, wheezing breaths of her 2-year-old son, Leo, who slept fitfully in his crib. His fever had spiked again, and the last of the children's acetaminophen had been used up that morning. She opened her banking app for the 10th time, a pointless ritual of self-punishment. The balance remained unchanged, $7.42. It was not enough for the antibiotic prescription waiting at the pharmacy, not enough for a box of diapers, and certainly not enough to stop the impending homelessness that loomed over them. Panic, a familiar and venomous serpent, coiled in her stomach. She was a single mother, utterly alone, and she was failing. Her pride, the one thing she had clung to so fiercely since Leo's father had walked out, was now a luxury she could no longer afford. Desperation tasted like ash in her mouth. She grabbed her worn laptop, the screen flickering erratically, and stuffed it into a tote bag alongside Leo's favorite stuffed bear. There was one last, humiliating option she had sworn she would never take: a payday loan. The interest rates were criminal, a debt trap she might never escape. But what choice did she have? The library's internet was too slow, so she bundled a still-sleeping Leo into his stroller and headed for the warmth of the daily grind, a small cafe downtown where the coffee was cheap and the Wi-Fi was free. The bell above the cafe door chimed, announcing her arrival into a cloud of steam and the rich aroma of roasted coffee beans. She found a small table in the corner, positioning the stroller so she could watch Leo. As she opened her laptop, her gaze drifted across the room and froze. A man sat near the window, his back partially to her, engrossed in a phone call. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. There was something about the set of his shoulders, the line of his jaw, that was painfully, impossibly familiar. Then he turned his head slightly, and the world tilted on its axis. Damian Vance. It was him, the boy she had loved with the fierce, all-consuming passion of a 17-year-old. The boy who had promised her forever under a blanket of summer stars and then vanished from her life without a single word the day after graduation. 10 years had passed, and the ghost of him had haunted her quietest moments. But this was no ghost. This was a man, polished and powerful, a world away from the lanky teenager with the easy smile and paint-splattered jeans she remembered. A wave of old hurt and fresh humiliation washed over her. Here he was, the picture of success, while she was seconds away from applying for a predatory loan just to keep her sick child from being thrown onto the street. She quickly looked down, her cheeks burning, praying he would not see her, would not recognize the tired, frightened woman she had become. Just then, Leo stirred, his whimper escalating into a thin, feverish cry. Alara's attention snapped back to her son. "Shoo, baby, it's okay," she whispered, her hands fumbling to soothe him. In her haste, she knocked his stuffed bear from the stroller, and it landed on the floor with a soft thud. Before she could retrieve it, a polished leather shoe entered her field of vision. A hand reached down, picking up the worn toy. "I believe this is yours." The voice was deeper now, laced with a command she did not recognize, but the underlying timbre was the same. She looked up slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs, and met his eyes. For a split second, there was nothing but polite indifference in their cool, gray depths. Then, a flicker of confusion, followed by a wave of stunned recognition that stole the breath from her lungs. "Alara." Damian breathed her name like a forgotten word. At that exact moment, her phone buzzed with a text from the pharmacy. "Prescription for Leo Martin ready for pickup. Total, $18,750. The number was a death sentence. A sob caught in her throat, and she had to look away, unable to bear the pity she was sure to see in his eyes. He saw it all anyway, the frantic text on her screen, the eviction notice peeking from her bag, the raw desperation etched onto her face. "I'm sorry," she stammered, reaching for the bear. "We're just leaving." "Wait," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. He ended his phone call with a curt, "Handle it," and gave her his full attention. "What's wrong?" Pride, stubborn and useless, flared within her. Nothing is wrong. It was good to see you, Damien, but I have to go. He placed a hand gently on her arm, stopping her. Alara, please, let me help. His gaze fell to Leo, who was now coughing weakly. Your son is sick. You're in some kind of trouble. It was not a question. I don't need your charity, she snapped, the words sharp with a decade of resentment. It's not charity, he said, his expression unreadable. He pulled out a sleek, black wallet. But instead of cash, he produced a business card. Damien Vance, CEO, Vance Industries. CEO. The title seemed both absurd and completely fitting. I need a new executive assistant. My last one was incompetent. The job comes with a comprehensive benefits package, including corporate housing. The salary should be more than enough to cover any immediate expenses. Alara stared at him, bewildered. An executive assistant? I have no experience. You can't be serious. You were the most organized person I ever knew, he stated simply, as if recalling a fact from a textbook. You managed the entire yearbook committee, the debate team, and your part-time job while getting perfect grades. I'm serious. The offer is real. Come to this address tomorrow morning. We'll sort out the details. He looked down at Leo again, his face softening for an instant. Get your son his medicine. I'll have my driver take you. Before she could protest again, he had already spoken into his phone, and a black sedan materialized at the curb. He pressed several $100 bills into her hand, closing her fingers around them. This is a signing bonus, he said, preempting her argument. An advance. Not a gift. His gaze held hers, intense and commanding. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, and with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Alara standing in the middle of the cafe, clutching a stuffed bear and a lifeline she could not begin to understand. The next morning, Alara stood before the towering glass monolith of Vance Industries, feeling small and hopelessly out of place. The money Damien had given her had covered Leo's medicine and a week's worth of groceries, a temporary reprieve that felt more like a tightening leash than a rescue. Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake, a pride-swallowing trap. But one look at Leo, sleeping peacefully in his stroller with the fever finally broken, solidified her resolve. She had no other choice. The job, as it turned out, was terrifyingly real. Damien's office was a sprawling suite on the top floor with panoramic views of the city, a world of quiet power and immense wealth. He was all business, his demeanor cool and professional as he outlined her duties. It was a dizzying list of responsibilities, from managing his chaotic schedule to preparing briefs for board meetings. Yet, as he spoke, she realized he was right. She could do this. The tasks called upon skills she had not used in years, her meticulous organization, her quick grasp of complex information, her ability to impose order on chaos. The salary he quoted made her gasp. It was more than she had ever dreamed of making in a year. Then came the matter of the corporate housing. He explained that a fully furnished 2-bedroom apartment was available in a building the company owned, just 10 minutes from the office. It's standard for senior staff, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. There's an excellent daycare on the ground floor. All part of the package. It was too much. Too perfect. The coincidences began to stack up, each one a small, sharp prick of suspicion. The apartment was not just an apartment. It was beautiful, filled with light, and stocked with everything she and Leo could possibly need, from a pantry full of food to a closet of new toys. The job was not just a job. It was a role that seemed tailor-made for her long-dormant abilities. Damien seemed to anticipate her every need before she voiced it, solving problems she had not even identified yet. She tried to maintain a professional distance, to treat him as nothing more than her boss. But it was impossible. He was a constant presence, his quiet observation following her everywhere. Sometimes, she would look up from her desk to find him watching her, a strange, unreadable emotion in his eyes. He was kind to Leo, bringing him small gifts and once spending 20 minutes on the floor of his office showing him how to build a tower of blocks, a scene so painfully domestic it made her heart ache. Her suspicion festered, growing into a knot of anger and confusion. This was not just a job offer. This was a calculated, systematic takeover of her life. He was inserting himself into every corner, making her dependent on him. After 2 weeks of this unnerving perfection, she could not take it anymore. She stormed into his office late one evening after everyone else had gone home, her hands clenched at her sides. "I want to know what this is really about," she demanded, her voice shaking with restrained emotion. Damien looked up from a stack of reports, his expression calm. "I'm not sure what you mean, Alara. You're doing excellent work. Don't patronize me," she cried, the dam of her control finally breaking. "This job, the apartment, the daycare, none of it is a coincidence. You knew. You knew everything about my situation. Why are you doing this, Damien? Is this some kind of guilt trip? Are you trying to pay me off for disappearing 10 years ago?" She accused him, her voice thick with the pain of that old abandonment. "Do you think you can just throw money at me and fix everything?" He stood up slowly, the calm exterior finally cracking. A muscle twitched in his jaw. He walked around his massive desk until he was standing just a few feet from her. The air crackled with a decade of unspoken words. "Guilt," he said, his voice low and raw. "Yes, I feel guilt. More than you can ever imagine. But this isn't about that." He took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, the carefully constructed walls around him crumbled. "The summer after graduation," he began, his gaze distant. "My parents were on their way to visit my grandparents. A drunk driver ran a red light." He stopped, swallowing hard. "They were both killed instantly. I was 18 years old, Alara. One minute I was planning our future, and the next, my entire world was gone." Alara stared at him, her anger dissolving into shock. She had never known. No one had ever told her. "My uncle became my legal guardian," Damien continued, his voice heavy with memory. "He took control of everything, the estate, the company, and me. He said I had to step up, that Vance Industries was my responsibility now. He isolated me. He told me I needed to forget my high school life, to focus on my new reality." His eyes, now filled with a profound sadness, met hers. "I tried to call you. I wrote you letters. My uncle intercepted everything. He told me you'd moved on, that you were with someone else and happy. He said contacting you would only be a selfish distraction. I believed him," Damien confessed, his voice breaking. "I was a grieving kid trying to run a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I buried myself in work because it was the only thing that didn't hurt. But I never, ever stopped thinking about you." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and transformative. "I started looking for you a few years ago," he admitted quietly. "It wasn't easy. You changed your name after your marriage. A private investigator finally found you a month ago. He told me everything. About your struggles, about Leo." He took a step closer, his expression earnest and vulnerable. "The meeting at the cafe wasn't an accident. I orchestrated it. I was a coward. I saw what you were going through, and I didn't know how to approach you without looking like some rich fool trying to buy forgiveness. So I offered you a job, a way to help that I hoped your pride would let you accept." Tears streamed down Alara's face as the truth settled over her. His actions were not born of manipulation, but of a desperate, long-held love. The suspicion she had harbored washed away, replaced by a wave of overwhelming empathy for the broken boy he had been and the lonely man he had become. All the years of bitterness, of feeling abandoned, were reframed in an instant. He had not left her, he had been taken from her. Just as they began to navigate this fragile new understanding, a shadow from Damien's past emerged. Marcus Thorne, a senior board member and a man who had been a protege of Damien's controlling uncle, had always viewed Damien with resentment, believing he was an unworthy heir. He saw Damien's sudden focus on Alara as a weakness to be exploited. Marcus was in the middle of negotiating a massive merger, one he planned to sabotage in a way that would make Damien look incompetent, paving the way for his own takeover. He began to watch Alara, digging into her past, seeing her as the perfect pawn. With his access to the company's internal systems, he fabricated a trail of digital evidence, emails, and financial transfers that made it appear as though Alara was leaking sensitive merger details to a competitor. His plan was simple and cruel. Discredit Damien by proving his new executive assistant, a woman he clearly had personal feelings for, was a corporate spy. The attack came without warning. Alara was called into an emergency meeting with human resources and company security. They presented her with the evidence, printouts of emails she had never written, records of wire transfers she had never made. The accusation was clear: corporate espionage. She was suspended immediately, her access to the building revoked. The world she had so carefully begun to rebuild was shattered. The threat was not just to her job, but to her reputation, her freedom. Marcus had made it personal, framing her so perfectly that denial seemed futile. She and Leo were in danger, caught in a corporate power play she could not comprehend. Damien was blindsided but reacted instantly. He knew Alara was innocent. He recognized the venomous tactics of Marcus Thorne, the same kind of manipulation his uncle had used years ago. The threat to Alara was a direct assault on him, and it forced them into an alliance. He brought her back to his penthouse, turning the sprawling apartment into a war room. "He underestimated you," Damien told her, his voice grim as they pored over the fabricated documents. "And he underestimated me." They worked together, a seamless team fueled by adrenaline and a shared purpose. His vast resources combined with her sharp, analytical mind. Alara, drawing on the accounting skills from a degree she had never been able to use, began to meticulously dissect the forged financial records. She worked for hours, tracing the digital breadcrumbs, her focus absolute. She was no longer a victim. She was a partner in this fight. "Here," she said late one night, pointing to a discrepancy on a spreadsheet. "This transfer log. The timestamp is in a different format from all the others. It was pasted in, and the server code. It traces back to a terminal in the Zurich office, one that Marcus used last month. It was the key, the single loose thread that could unravel Marcus's entire scheme." The final confrontation took place at an emergency board meeting Marcus had called, confident he was about to deliver the killing blow to Damien's career. He stood before the board, a picture of false sincerity, presenting his damning evidence against Alara. He painted a picture of Damien as a reckless leader, blinded by his feelings for a woman who had betrayed the company. When he finished, a tense silence filled the room. Damien gave Alara a small, reassuring nod. She stood up, her voice clear and steady, and walked the board through the inconsistency she had found. She explained the timestamp anomaly, the server code, her explanation precise and irrefutable. She was not a damsel in distress. She was a competent professional exposing a fraud. Her discovery created the opening Damien needed. "Thank you, Alara," he said, turning his cold, furious gaze on Marcus. "Ms. Martin's discovery prompted us to look more closely at Mr. Thorne's own financial activities." On the large screen behind him, he projected a series of bank statements and internal transfer requests. It turns out Marcus hasn't been just planning to sabotage a merger. He's been embezzling company funds for over a year. The frame-up of an innocent woman was simply a desperate, pathetic attempt to create a distraction before his crimes were discovered. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus Thorne's face went pale, his composure crumbling into pure panic. Damien didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at the head of security and said, "Remove him." As Marcus was escorted from the room, protesting his innocence to deaf ears, Damien stood before the board, his authority absolute. He had not only neutralized the threat, but had also protected Alara, vindicating her completely. That night, the tension of the past few weeks finally broke. In the quiet of his penthouse, the city lights twinkling below, the shared danger and collaborative victory had forged their bond into something unbreakable. "He almost took you away from me," Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I lost you once, Alara. I was not going to let it happen again." "You never lost me," she whispered, her heart overflowing. In that moment, the last of the walls between them fell away. He closed the distance, and the kiss that followed was not just a culmination of the past few weeks, but a release of 10 years of longing, regret, and unspoken love. It was a promise of a new beginning, forged in crisis and sealed with unwavering commitment. A year later, the scent of cinnamon and pine filled their home. Alara watched from the doorway of the living room as Damien knelt on the floor, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He was patiently helping a chattering, 3-year-old Leo place a clumsy, handmade star on top of a small Christmas tree. "Higher, Dada, higher." Leo squealed with delight. The word, Dada, still sent a thrill of warmth through Alara's heart. Damien had become the father Leo had never had, a constant, loving presence in their lives. The isolated, wounded billionaire was gone, replaced by a man who laughed freely and whose eyes shone with a deep, abiding happiness. Their life was a tapestry woven from the threads of their past and the bright promise of their future. Alara was no longer Damien's assistant. Her sharp intellect and unwavering integrity had been impossible to ignore, and she was now the vice president of operations for Vance Industries, a respected leader in her own right. She had found not just security, but fulfillment. A brilliant diamond glittered on her left hand, a constant reminder of the night Damien had officially asked her to be his wife, to make their little family permanent. She walked into the room and wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder as they both watched Leo admire his handiwork. "It's perfect," she murmured. Damien turned his head and kissed her softly. "Everything is," he agreed, his gaze holding hers. Alara looked around the beautiful, warm home, at the man she had loved her whole life and the child who was her entire world. She thought back to that desperate, freezing morning in the cafe, a moment of such profound hopelessness it had nearly broken her. It was strange, she reflected, how life worked. How the absolute worst day of her life had been the first day of her best life. A wrong turn had led her exactly where she was always meant to be.